I know this post might be a wall of text, but I really do feel like I need to set the record straight on a few things. As you all know, me, Maddie, and my little cousin Paul went down to Crosby Beach over the weekend to enjoy some of the nice weather we've been having. We went down on Sunday afternoon with a few beers and a disposable barbecue, purely with the intention of having a nice little scran and some bevies. I want to make that abundantly clear. We weren't going looking for trouble. This isn't part of some mad gang beef, and we don't live like that. We're not thugs. We just went down to the beach on a nice sunny afternoon to have a good time, and it turned into an absolute nightmare. We got there, had our little barbecue, then, because the wind picked up a bit, we moved into what was basically a pit among the sand dunes. We were there for quite a while, listening to music and drinking cans, and it's coming up to 9 at night. It was still dead sunny out, and the beach was basically deserted apart from the last few families and groups packing up their stuff. We stayed long after they left, and round about the time the sun was starting to set, Paul runs up to the top of the dunes and tells us he can see someone walking towards us from way off down the beach. Paul said the man was on his own, just walking down the beach. Then he stops and starts looking at Paul. That's what he said anyway, like he stopped dead in the sand and turned a bit as if he'd just spotted him, and then he started walking towards us. I was asking who it was, but Paul said he didn't recognize the bloke and continued to watch him approach us before backing down into the dune pit with us, saying, "He's coming." I'm quite nervous at this point, but when the bloke appeared at the top of the dune, he looked perfectly normal and just said hello to us. We exchanged a few words, told him we were just having a few cans. He then nodded in approval, asking us if we'd had a good day. It was basic small talk like that. Then out of nowhere, he asked if we believed in God. There was a bit of a pause where all three of us could tell that something was a bit off about him. I mean, that's just not something you ask someone seconds after meeting them, is it? I didn't want to offend the fella or anything, so I told him I'd keep an open mind. And Paul said no, but Maddie said yeah, he did. That he went to Catholic school and his nan was from Ireland and all this. The bloke didn't seem very interested in our answers, but hearing Maddie say that he was Catholic seemed to get his attention. The fella just starts staring at him, and it's so awkward that Maddie has to ask if he believes in God in return, just to fill the awkward silence. The fella doesn't reply. He just pointed at Maddie and said, "It's you." Maddie asked if they'd met before, then started to apologize if he didn't remember him, but as he's doing this, the lad started walking down into the pit. As he gets to the bottom, he says, "I'm sorry, I just need a bit. It's only a bit." And I think he's about to rob a can off us, or worse, mug us for our wallets or whatever. But he keeps walking through the sand towards Maddie, and that's when I hear our Paul shout that he had a knife. I only saw him stab Maddie once before I rushed him, but I know he was trying to stab him again as he went down. I tried to pull the knife away from Maddie, but the guy only used my momentum against me and brought it down into my leg just above my knee. Feeling it stop after hitting bone was the most horrible part, and I'm really, really lucky that it didn't cause more bleeding than it did. After he pulled the knife out of my leg, he actually looked down and said, "Sorry," but as he looked at the knife, which was covered in mine and Maddie's blood, he smiled. I honestly thought he was going to finish us both off there and then, like this man is obviously not well, but for some reason he didn't. He wasn't saying sorry because he was going to finish us off. He was just saying it before he ran up the dune and disappeared. Paul got out his phone and started dialing 999, and for a minute, I just focused on putting pressure on the stab wound near my knee. But then, I looked over at Maddie and saw that he was in much worse condition. He'd been stabbed in the stomach, so I used my t-shirt to soak up the bleeding and put a bit of pressure on it until the ambulance arrived. I thought they'd just send an actual ambulance out for us, but when I saw that they'd sent a bloody helicopter, like an air ambulance, I was more scared than I'd ever been in my life before. Like, why would they send something like that if Maddie's life or my life wasn't in serious danger? I got seen to by nurses, but Maddie went straight for an operation to repair the damage the stab wound had done, and that's the last time I saw him awake. I went to his room in the hospital on the day I was discharged, but he was out for the count and the nurses told me not to wake him up. The operations were a success though. I've not heard about any complications or anything, so I'm hoping he'll make a full recovery. He'll have a nasty scar on his belly though, same as I got on my leg. As for the attacker, none of us had seen him before, and as much as we gave the police some quite detailed descriptions of him, he's not been picked up to my knowledge. We haven't gotten some secret feud we're not telling anyone about. We don't sell drugs, we're not in a gang, nothing like that. This is a totally random attack. I need to make that clear. If anyone saw a bloke walking around Crosby on Sunday night, wearing all black training gear, please contact Merseyside Police. He had brown hair, dark blue or brown eyes, medium height with a skinny build, and spoke with a quite thick accent. You can contact DSO with any tips and the whole thing will be in Wednesday's Echo. Please don't hesitate to help us catch who did this. They're very, very dangerous, and they almost took Maddie's life. If we don't get them into custody, someone else could get hurt and it could be bad. I have family over in Australia, so for 2 Christmases when I was a teenager, we packed up our stuff and traveled all the way from the UK to Brisbane to spend a month with them. The second month we spent with them when I was 19 was honestly the best 4 weeks of my life. The first visit when I was 14, not so much. It wasn't because I didn't get on with my cousins. They were wonderful, like little replicas of me and my brother, just with Aussie accents. And it definitely wasn't because of the weather or food or anything like that. No, my first trip to Australia was a nightmare because of, you guessed it, the wildlife. Because of the area and the time of year, my Aussie Uncle Tommy warned us of mostly about brown snakes. He told my parents to keep kids away from the garage, the shed, any overgrown areas because not only were brown snakes very venomous, they were really bloody aggressive too. So for the first week or so of being there, I'm avoiding any bushes or long grass like the plague, just praying I don't bump into anything slithery or bitey while playing in the well-pruned garden with my cousins. Only this time, we're playing on the beach and I suddenly need a wee. But instead of thinking to go in the ocean, I slink off behind some trees to pull aside my bathing costume and do my business. But no sooner am I in the foliage, I see this massive snake all curled up. I don't know for certain if it was a brown snake or not, but I definitely wasn't about to stick around to find out. I bolt off back in the direction of the beach, screaming about the snake, and this freaks my parents out a bit while my cousin takes off to do a stand-up wee in the water. Not my proudest or most graceful moment, but far better than squatting next to a friggin' snake. My point is, I think I'm safe at the beach. I can go deep in the water, can't go into the bushes, but there on the beach it was actually safe. So after a late lunch of beachside barbecue, I wandered off to some rock pools not far from where we were all camped under the shade of our canopies. I'm alone, just dipping my toes in the cool water while eating one of those cheap ice pop things, literally thinking to myself, this place is alright if you ignore the snakes. I wouldn't mind coming back sometime. Then as I'm waving my feet around in the water, the swirling is kicking up some of the sand at the bottom of this rock, and suddenly, I see something tiny swim up around my toes. I obviously reacted with fear at first, pulling my feet out and peering down into the water to see what it was. Then, to my absolute delight, I saw the tiniest little creature swimming through the water. A tiny little creature that I assumed was a baby octopus. I mean, it was so small that it looked like it had fit in the palm of my hand, and seeing its little legs kicking in such a cute, coordinated way, oh my god, I just had to pick it up to get a closer look. I started trying to scoop it out of the water with cupped hands. It takes me a few tries, but I eventually manage it. Only once it's out of the water and I'm staring down at the cute little guy wriggling around in my hands, my mind is blown when it actually changes color. I had no idea that octopi could do that. Chameleons, sure, but octopi too, that's amazing. It went from yellow with black spots to black spots being filled with these almost luminously blue-colored rings, and it was honestly one of the most amazing, magical things I'd ever seen with my own eyes. Then right when I'm in the middle of admiring the thing, I feel this tiny little nip in my palm, no more painful than a sharp pinch. The jabs I had to get to visit Australia in the first place were more painful, so I didn't really think all that much of it. Like maybe the little guy's tentacle had suckered me a bit too hard or something. I dropped the little guy back in the rock pool, then set off back towards where the families were. It was only maybe half a football pitch back to them, and but halfway through the walk, I started to take a funny turn. I think the first thing I noticed was a kind of numbness in my lips and tongue. My mouth was dry, so I tried licking my lips, only to find I had less and less feeling in them by the second. I put this down to the ice pop, but as I carried on walking, I felt increasingly nauseous and tired to the point by the time I got back to the families, I just collapsed down onto my bum. Obviously, they were all saying, "Jenny, are you all right?" and things like that, but when I tried to tell them I wasn't feeling very well, I could barely get the words out. My throat was dry, I could barely swallow, and second by second, I'm feeling more and more numb all over, until eventually, I just collapsed back into the sand. Not everyone around it looked like I just passed out, but in reality, I was wide awake and fully conscious. I couldn't move, but I could hear everything they were saying about calling 000, the Aussie emergency number. Those were some of the most terrifying moments of my life, not just because I was somehow paralyzed, but because it was getting harder and harder to breathe. I'm slowly becoming so paralyzed that my respiratory system is shutting down, but I can't tell anyone. Honestly, just writing this is so difficult for me because although it was so long ago and patches of the next few days are blurry, I can still remember the feeling of terror that came from being certain that I was about to die. So like I said, totally paralyzed, but my eyes are open ever so slightly, so I can't really feel what's going on, but I can see when I'm being moved around by people, if that makes sense. I can also see when someone leaning down over my face and gets in really, really close. Then suddenly, that feeling of tightness in my chest is gone, and it takes me a second or two to figure how, but realize that someone is giving me CPR. I start to make out actual voices at that point, sort of tuning into each one, and I worked out that people were obviously trying to save my life, but they weren't family members. But the scariest bit was hearing one of them say, "I think she's gone, mate." I'm thinking, oh my god, no, please don't stop, please, God, check my pulse or something. Obviously, that's exactly what they did, or I wouldn't be here now to write this. But the sheer bloody relief when I heard, "She's still with us," before I could actually, suddenly, breathe again. I can't even put in the words, really. After that, I don't remember anything. I think I woke up in the hospital on a respirator, but I honestly think I could have just dreamed that because the next time I actually woke up, I was breathing on my own, and almost the entire family was in the hospital ready to welcome me back. I still had no idea what had happened to me, and my memory was in shambles. Even being in a hospital freaked me out at first, so that was one of the first things that I asked when I woke up. How did I get here? And the answer to the question came down to 3 little words: blue-ringed octopus. There are probably people reading this who are screaming, "Oh my god, no," as soon as I picked up that cute little 8-limbed guy. I thought it was a baby, but no. Fully grown adult blue-ringed octopus, and they're some of the most dangerous animals on the face of the earth. That was actually a story I saw a while ago from a tourist from America. She'd picked up a blue-ringed octopus just like I did while holidaying in Australia, having no idea what it was, only to be told after that it could have killed her in minutes. Hearing about that didn't half bring some bad memories. It's a tiny little animal whose venom can shut your entire body down in minutes, leaving you a prisoner in your own mind as your lungs slowly cease to function. Sounds like an absolute nightmare, doesn't it? Like something out of an alien invasion film or something. But it exists. It happened to me, and I only barely survived it. So please, if you're taking your kids to Australia, please properly educate yourself on the various dangers that might present themselves in any particular setting. That's exactly what I plan to do with my kids anyway, so they don't have to go through the same horror their mother endured. Many years ago, my husband and I took our kids on vacation to Sri Lanka. The flights were quite tough on them. I remember my son puking his guts up because his blood sugar was so low, and my little girl's ears popped so bad that she cried for the entire descent into Colombo. I promised them that it'd be worth it, but I was also terrified that they'd just end up hating it once we were there. But thank God, my son was sold on the idea as soon as he saw some of the wildlife, and when my daughter saw miles upon miles of gorgeous sandy beaches, she too suddenly forgot how grim the 17-hour flight was. So, at one point, my husband is off taking my son down some jungle-side roads in what was basically a walking safari tour, while me and our daughter relaxed on the beach. Anna had just turned 6, so she was just a little ball of energy who burned herself out digging in the sand and playing in the surf. So as long as I keep an eye, and plenty of sunblock on her, I was free to just relax and soak up the sun. Then at one point, I just hear, "Mommy, Mommy, look! Doggy!" I open my eyes and feel them straining from the intense sunlight, but there, clear as day, just a few hundred yards down the beach, was a dog. Anna loved dogs, and she'd point them out wherever she went, a trait that I can assure you has never left her. So I just gave her a, "Oh, isn't that nice, honey? Just remember they might not want to be petted like our dogs." I know that sounds weird, but one of the things we were warned was that there's no mass vaccination of animals in Sri Lanka, not to mention very little in the ways of formal dog training. That meant that not only were they considerably more likely to bite you should you catch one in a bad mood, but it meant that that bite could lead to some very, very nasty infections. But try explaining that to a 6-year-old. So me and my husband just went with what amounted to Sri Lankan dogs can get very grumpy because of the heat, and they don't like being petted like Nana's dog does. Knowing how grumpy intense heat made her, she ate up our excuse without many questions. So, like I said, I acknowledged the dog, then just closed my eyes again and carried on sunbathing. A minute later I hear, "Mommy, Mommy, look! Another doggy!" Again, I open my eyes, make myself a little sun visor with my hand, and look down the beach to see 2 dogs this time. They're both these blonde mongrel things, their breed indistinguishable as the result of probably hundreds of years of unchecked breeding. They hadn't caused us any trouble at that point, because as much as they were actually wild dogs, they were still quite chilled out. The beach cafes fed them leftovers to keep them sweet, so they spent most of their days just sleeping to beat the heat. Trouble was, they were decidedly unpredictable, and could be your average tail-wagging good boy one minute, then something distinctly different the next. So, as I said, I look up to see 2 dogs this time. They were playing in the sand, getting close to the water, then rushing back whenever a wave crashed in. Admittedly, it was very sweet, so I watched them playing for a minute before my eyes begin to close over again. A bit more time goes by, longer than between the first 2 of Anna's dog sightings. Then all of a sudden, I hear, "Mommy, Mommy, look! Look, Mommy!" This time, Anna is much further down the beach than the first 2 times she'd called me, and there's not 1 or 2 additional dogs on the beach. There's an entire pack of them. There must have been about 20 different dogs on the beach for the 3rd time I opened my eyes. There was a tiny little Jack Russell, some long-eared spaniel type, dogs of all shapes and sizes. But the one that was apparently leading the pack was this giant, moody-looking Doberman. It was quite surreal, actually, seeing a pack of feral dogs just wandering around together like that. I can't speak for everyone, but where I'm from, you'd never actually see a stray dog roaming the streets, or not at least anymore. A lost dog maybe, but a legitimate pack of strays? Not a chance. But in Sri Lanka, seeing what appeared to be a live-action version of an all-canine Disney film was a relatively common occurrence. At first, I give a little chuckle and reach for my phone to get a picture. But just as I do, I give the whole scene another look. 6-year-old daughter, pack of stray dogs. She's slowly wandering towards them. They're paying her increasingly more attention as more and more dogs stop playing and begin to look in her direction. It was this huge uh-oh moment, and as it hit me, I got up, took my flip-flops off in preparation to run, and started calmly calling out for Anna to walk back to me. I tried my best to keep calm, I really did, but Anna must have been able to just detect the panic in my voice. She stops to look around at me, this nervous look on her face, and as she does, the dogs start walking down the beach towards her, one by one. I was saying, "Walk back to Mommy, Anna. Walk back to Mommy," trying to emphasize the walking part because I knew the dog would only chase her if she ran. They were all staring her down, ears pricked up, and I'm praying for them to just stay put, but as Anna looked back, saw that they were closer, and started to run, they gave chase. What I felt next, I don't think I can even call it fear. I had to put myself in between those dogs and my daughter, even if it meant me getting hurt. That's just what a mother does. I wouldn't even say I'm a particularly brave person, but I didn't think twice, and I suppose that just speaks to the power of motherly instincts. I sprint forward, position myself between Anna and the charging dogs, then begin banging my flip-flops together, screaming. I waved my arms in the air, jumped up and down, banging the flip-flops intermittently, and I must have looked like an absolute maniac, but my God, did it work. If all of those dogs just carried on rushing me, they could have taken me down in seconds, but my wild display had them literally stopping in their tracks. Or rather, once I'd managed to psych the Doberman out, the rest lost their spunk. I still remember it like it was yesterday, seeing him or her make this goofy, scared dog face before it literally skidded in the sand, turned tail, and ran away. As I turned around to comfort the now hysterical Anna, I realized that pretty much everyone that was sunbathing, chilling in beachside cafes, or swimming had emerged to watch. And I do mean watch. Not a single one of them came to check on us, and in the end, it was actually some little Sri Lankan surfer type that ran over to ask if we were okay. He was swiftly followed by the owner of the cafe we'd been visiting. He checks us over, sees that we haven't been bitten, then invites us back up to the cafe's patio. Within seconds, he presents my daughter with a huge bowl of chocolate ice cream, and the man was a genius in my mind. She went from absolutely inconsolable to gently sobbing to fine within about 15 minutes. Don't get me wrong, she was still a bit freaked out following the whole thing. Anyone would be. But we palmed her off by saying they just wanted to play. But they might get a little rough, so it's best to stay near Mommy and Daddy whenever there's lots of doggies around. This made sense to her, and she was back to thinking Sri Lanka was the best place ever in no time. I suppose this has been a quite long-winded way of saying that no, it's not a terrible idea to take your kids on vacation to more exotic places. Yes, there can be risks, but I honestly feel like the net benefit is high enough to make it totally worth it. Just be sure to do your research, and remember that a seemingly harmless situation can turn into a dangerous one in a remarkably uncomfortable amount of time.